Good morning. That sun's gnarly. Don't sit there. Okay. So normally when I give a presentation, I'm talking about a lot of logic or systems or processes or data science or sports science or soccer. We're not talking about any of that. Today I'm going to share with you a little bit of my story. So instead of me doing my normal and having a presentation posted up here for you and we'll go through some slides and it feels like a lecture, this is me sharing my heart and my story. So before we do any of that though, just in case you don't get anything out of all the feel good and all the story, we're going to stand up and we're going to do a little cognitive neuroscience. So stand up real quick. In your teeny tiny little bit of space, choose a range of motion assessment that you want to do, whether it's shoulder flexion or a hamstring check. Go ahead, do what you want. Maybe check it on both sides. Cool. If you're really good at one, do the other. Good. Find a mark on your hand or your thumb. Okay. You're going to stare at that mark, and all I want you to do is put that mark straight out in front of your nose. Follow me first, or watch me first. I'm going to come all the way in until I see double, and all the way back out. For some of you, that may be here. Some of you, that may be here. As you do it, try not to blink. Bring it all the way in, all the way out. Good. Now relax. Take a breath because you forgot to breathe. Put your hand back up. Do it one more time. Good. Reassess your initial test. Did you get better? Great job. Sit down. So if you need something to go learn later, go learn neuroanatomy to understand that 90% of posture is reflexive from the visual and vestibular system. We'll leave that. We won't talk any more anatomy, and we'll move into this. So when I was talking to Britt, and I was like, you know, I'll speak. I'd like to share my story. I was like, but what would you guys like me to talk about? She said, well, talk about whatever you want. And I was like, well, all right. So saddle up. I'm going to share how I got into strength and conditioning as a field. So I was a collegiate thrower at the University of North Carolina-Wilmington, right up the road. Yep. I was going to be an international business major, go to law school, work for a company in a different country, speaking a foreign language, doing corporate law. Then I met my strength coach, tatted, neck down, right? 90s rock. You wonder if he does illicit drugs to wake up in the morning, that type of guy. And after 2 weeks of training with him, he was like, you're going to be a strength coach. And I was like, you're right. And a little dangerous, right? So I changed my major from international business over to exercise science. I'm like, awesome, here we go. So 4 years later, I've worked at UNC-Wilmington. I've studied there. I've learned. I've grown as a person. I'm like, all right, next level, what are we going to do? At that time, aged myself a little bit, when I graduated in 2007, I was like, where am I going to go learn from next? At that time, there was only 5 colleges in the world, actually, that had a strength and conditioning specific program. So I went to one of those. That was Baylor University. And when I went to Baylor, I was a GTA. So I taught classes, I took classes, but that wasn't really why I was there. I was there to get the science and the information, but I was there to work with the coaches. So they went through a football change 6 months in, and then Kaz Kazadi's there for his first year. I learned a lot. He learned a lot in his first year. And I've worked with Charlie Melton, all these amazing strength coaches, and that led me to going to an internship at Auburn next. So graduate, go to Auburn, paid intern, doing all the work, you know. Football, baseball, women's basketball, women's soccer, bouncing around, learning from yaks, listening to us say up and down 50 times every morning at 4:30. It's great. So do that. Auburn hires me full-time the next year. Women's basketball, women's soccer, that's your jam. I do that for 6 years straight. Awesome. The only thing that wasn't awesome really about it was when you work women's basketball and women's soccer and you travel with both teams and the administrator's telling you that you need to support both staffs and you have a servant heart, but you really can't duplicate yourself there yet because we're not there technology-wise. I can never be in 2 places at once. So that led me to having 3 days off typically, Christmas, maybe the day after, and then a travel day. And then going to conferences was my off for 6 years. And so when you do that for 6 years, you can imagine that maybe you're not really following the path of what your life should be, but you're following the path of what the profession or what you feel the profession is telling you it should be. Here I am, first full-time job, SEC, big school, big programs. What else is there, right? Well, everything inside me, there was a lot of moral conflict over, I'm in this role, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, but somehow I feel like I'm not anywhere where I'm supposed to be. Because I'm not able to actually have the influence and the connection that I want and actually do the things I want, but I feel like I'm doing the things that people told me I should be doing. So thankfully for me, I moved from that into a role where I just had women's soccer, but there became a tipping point. A tipping point for me was a lot of struggle and a lot of adversity, and unlike some people that choose their adversity, this one got to choose me, which was awesome. So I'm going to share my story of how you can have everything planned up in line and the perfect plan to go, here's what we're doing, here's my year-long periodization, but what do you do when that overwhelming, life-shifting, tipping point type adversity hits, and the only thing that really can get you from there to the next phase, which is surviving, is your own awareness and your connection with people. So in 2015, women's basketball decided they wanted to hire someone just to be women's basketball. That's a nice way of saying you're fired. I worked just women's soccer from that point on. That was really hard because you take it as, what did I do wrong, right? What didn't I meet? What box didn't I check? And it's not about you. It's not about me. It's about fitting whatever that role is or whatever those people need or whatever that coach needs. And fast forward later in that summer, I was feeling a little tired, but like we're strength coaches, we're tired all the time, right? Did I knock my mic out? And so after feeling tired turned into, we train at 6 a.m. with women's soccer, going home, not telling my friends or my coaches or the staff, but basically going back to sleep until the next morning training. So you can do the math in your head. I was awake for about 3 hours a day. And by July, I knew something was actually wrong, so I was like, okay, I need to go to a doctor. So I went to a doctor in August, and he had diagnosed me with adrenal fatigue. I had basically no hormones in my body. So progesterone, testosterone, pregnenolone, estrogen, all of them. Check them, 0. Great. That's probably why you're tired. It's probably why you feel when you walk from here to here, you've done all of Squattober in one day. So they hooked me up with some meds, get me on some hormones. I'm like, awesome. That was the problem. I wanted to believe that was the problem. I wanted to believe that was the solution then. Fast forward 6 months later, we're going on first SEC trip, going up to Columbia, Missouri, the other one. And I check in with the doctor beforehand. Our resting heart rate was about 105, chilling. I was like, I just have like cramps and I'm not even doing anything. So he gave me some magnesium and he said, hey, chew some hard candy on the flight. It'll distract your head from your heart. I'm like, awesome. That's a great idea. So get to Missouri. I remember this is back in the day when like sports science was literally a suitcase to have like heart rate monitors, and I'm like trying to drag it across the field. I make it across the field. By the time I get back to the locker room for the pregame talk, they're 10 minutes in. I was like, damn it. So I started walking back to the field, So we get back from Missouri. That Monday was our off day. I didn't really leave the apartment, the house. The next day, I have a new drug to pick up. I'm like, great, gonna get a new drug. This is gonna be what makes me feel better. So I walk in, go to the pharmacist, steal a Sprite. That's when you know something was wrong. I don't even like Sprite. Get that drug, go have a seat. Not gonna move until I feel better. In walks my doctor's nurse practitioner, and she sees me. She walks over to me very calmly and says, you need to come with me. And I said, we have a lift in the morning, and then I'll be there. So by that time, my skin was about the color of my shoes, nice and gray. My lips were pretty blue, but I made it to the lift the next day. I sat in the lift. If you know anything about Alabama, it gets a little warm, so I'm in full sweats. It's September during a lift. in a warehouse style that doesn't have AC like this. So by the end of the lift, one of my players comes up to me and she's like, are you sure you're okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. It's probably just like the flu or whatever. You don't want to make them concerned. I asked somebody to actually drive me to the doctor's office because I lost my peripheral vision. I was like, probably shouldn't drive. So I get to the doctor's office. They lay me down. They take some blood. Great, wonderful. I love needles, not. So that was fun anyways. They don't say anything. He takes an action step to actually drive my blood to get centrifuged to get the results right then because he knew something was wrong. So now we've had a nurse practitioner that's somewhere that she's not normally. We have a doctor that takes an extra step to drive something to get some results. He gets the results back. He doesn't say anything to me. They just load me up on blankets, and they're like, we're going to drive you to the hospital. Drive me to the hospital, take me in straight to a room. Another lady says, I'm going to take some more of your blood. And I'm like, wonderful. 8 tries later, they get enough, and she leaves, doesn't say anything, comes back in. Doctor walks in. First time I met him, he goes, hi, my name is Dr. Johnson, and you're in a blood emergency, and you have leukemia, but I'm not sure what type. I'm like, great. He's like, why? Great? And I was like, yeah, I knew something was wrong. I'm just glad you know what's wrong. And I said, now we can fix it. And so from that very first time I heard that word, I was like, there wasn't a fear involved. I already knew it was wrong. I already knew my body was fighting something that I couldn't just keep going. So they told me nicely that, normally your blood content's around 14.6. Mine was 3. So had I not gone in and gotten tested later that week, I would have quietly passed away in my sleep or had a major cardiac event. Just because your body's working so hard to move blood content, you don't have blood. So now I'm sharing a cancer story, and the reason that I'm sharing the cancer story is because it's something that's hard for people to talk about. It's hard for people to ask questions, and I still get the people, how are you? Are you feeling okay? I'm like, my Oura ring says I slept 4 hours, but yeah, I'm good. So this is a privilege that I earned by being able to survive something that was put in front of me, but part of the reason I have that survival to be able to tell is because of all of you. So now I'm on a platform to share this story because there's people that don't necessarily have the same support, and I speak for the ones that can. The ones that are no longer with us, the ones that are fighting it currently, or the ones that are yet to come. So 80% of leukemia patients with my type of leukemia pass away. And I didn't ask that stat until my final day with my doctor. And he's like, no one ever asked me that. I'm like, yeah, because it's your death rate. I'm like, we don't want to know that. So, but I wanted to know because I knew all along, I was like, I have so many people behind me and myself behind me. There was never a question for me of whether or not I could do it. And if it was left up to me and only me, I would have done it. But thank God for good drugs. So I get diagnosed in September, go to the hospital in Birmingham. Throughout that process, I do chemo. And one thing about leukemia is, so what happens is your bone marrow produces small little blast cells, and they turn into red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. With leukemia, they just stay these immature little cells that serve no purpose and just wreck you. So you don't have anything to carry oxygen around. You don't have any platelets, so you can't actually clot blood. So that's why they're like, please don't even brush your teeth too hard. I'm like, okay. I'm like, can I shave? I'm not really. And they're like, no shaving, no haircuts, no nothing. I'm like, awesome. So here we go. And my cancer process wasn't really, there was no major thing that was like, this was the hard day. So we were 3 weeks into my treatment, and I go, thankfully I had very favorable genetics. I had the AML specialist, one of the world's leading AML specialists, acute myeloid leukemia. And so he happens to be in Birmingham, Alabama. He's not even there anymore. So again, there's something else that happens that puts me in favor. He says, hey, you have favorable genetics. I'd like you to sign up for a clinical trial. I love science. Yes, let's do it. Great. So I do standard induction chemo plus a clinical trial drug. So if you know anything about cancer, they're trying to make better chemo so that people don't have to go through the chemo side effects they've done since pretty much the 60s. So that new form of chemo, what that does is it targets the protein in the cell, targets the specific cancer cells, breaks that down, it disintegrates, so there's no actual poison just floating in your bloodstream. So you don't get all the other gnarly side effects. For me, one positive was I have a great bald head. It's perfectly round, no dimples. Thanks, Mom, for not dropping me. And in the hospital, it's just every day is something new, right? Your first day there, you're like, oh, we're doing a PICC line. Your second day, later that day, they're like, we're doing a bone marrow biopsy. And kids are crazy. They like to have them done in their sternum so they can see them. I'm like, no thanks, we'll stick to the back. And all those to be said is science is amazing. And if you're willing to open yourself up, I'd gone from a place to where thinking everything in my profession was leading me to a certain way, to flipping it on its head, no longer being able to say, I'm the perfect coach, I'm up at 6, I train at 7, I have a team at 8, I have a team at 9, I eat meal 3 at 10, I come around, I go to sleep by 9, I practice what I preach every day. Now I'm like, oh, I'm gonna lay in a hospital bed, and the goal today is to walk. So, and then you break all the rules, right? Like there was a soccer game in Birmingham. I was like, can I go to a soccer game? My best friend, Melissa, she buys soccer tickets. We leave the hospital. I go to the game. Sitting there in my PICC line, about halftime, I'm like, I don't feel too good anymore. Spike a fever, go back, whatever. So you're able to do a lot of those things. You're able to have a lot of support. But one of the things that helped me a lot was the actual culture of this. Strength coaches and the community of soccer specifically, and the way they reached out to support me, because now my vulnerability was up on Front Street, and it wasn't even a decision to make over, like, do I share what's going on? It was, people need to know, because I think I knew that I needed that support, and being a strength coach can be very lonely. Being a female strength coach can even be lonelier, because here you are practicing in a role that you think is fitting a certain societal norm. It's not really fitting what you think is good for you, and then all of a sudden everything flips on its head. So I'm like, man, okay. So this guy comes in, he's one of our team photographers. He said, can I take some pictures and basically just be here without being here? Well, you're 6'8", you can't be here without being here. So he followed around in a day, and that's where a lot of the pictures come from that you're gonna see. And part of the reason that I wanted to share this too was, and thank you to our community, because everything that they did, they had, one of my soccer players came up with a slogan about mega strong and put that out for everybody to see. And that sign went around, and a lot of the strength coaches in this room took part in being able to just do something as small as posting a picture on social media or saying a phrase on social media. So I'm gonna show you the video that explains a little bit of the story. Josh is gonna show you the video that's gonna explain some of the story. Whisper. So that just shows a little bit about like what actually happened, because I think when we speak about trauma and we speak about things that happen to us, visuals help a lot in being able to tell a story. Because even though I'm 3 years, 6 months, or 1,340 days out in remission, and 523 days away from being able to hit a 5-year mark to say I'm cured, the further you get out from that, the harder it is to step back in it sometimes. So when you go back in, a lot of people think like, oh, you're in remission, that's a great job. When you know people that struggle with cancer, sometimes the hardest thing they deal with is having to step back into that hospital, step back in that testing, to go back and say, hey, you're still good. So being able to kind of step away from life but then get pulled back into this thing that you had is just a reminder of how lucky I am to actually be here. So actually, I love the swag of dressing like this, but this is not really who I am. So when I say we speak for the ones that can't, there's currently a coach that I've never met. His name's Jude Logan. And I also hate having a shirt tucked in. Sorry, strength coaches. This is his shirt. He has leukemia. He's currently fighting right now. And what I'd like to offer him is something that I received, is a message from all of us. So I'd like you to stand up. And instead of a moment of silence to remember someone, we're going to give him a moment of strength. So I'd like you to clap. I'd like you to yell. I'd like you to do whatever it is you need to do in support of him right now. Thank you. Coach, that's for you. We are here to support you in your struggle. It's okay to not be okay. Speaking of struggle, you guys ever heard of the giant sequoia trees, the Sequoia National Forest? The General Sherman tree is like the largest tree by volume. They're these huge trees. I actually got to go there in December with my partner and check it out. It's a lot bigger in person. But something I didn't know when I went there was, went up to one of the trees, pick up this little tiny acorn. I'm like, this is the smallest acorn I've ever seen. I'm from North Carolina. Acorns like fall and hurt you. And they were like, yeah, these huge trees, small acorn. It kind of just reminded me of something is sometimes you don't know how little something can start and what it can grow to become. And the other thing I didn't know about sequoia trees is there's all these black marks on the bottom of them. So I asked one of the park rangers, I'm like, what are the black marks from? They're like, well, they're scars. Like, from what? Fire. I was like, okay, keep going, tell me more. Like, are we at risk? Do I need to run? Like, what's going on? They said the trees only keep growing by actually being burned at the bottom. And I was like, huh. So you go up to the tallest trees in the world, still growing, and at the bottom, the only way they keep going at the top is to be burned at the bottom. Okay. So that brings me back to struggle. And when you think about these trees and this growth through fire, it makes me think about so many of the things that we preach and teach and live. Struggle is either something you can choose, that's a fire you throw yourself into, whether that's the workouts you choose to do, whether that's the career you're in, whether that's staying in the family you're in. All of those things are things you can choose, and sometimes there's things that you can't choose, right? I had some adversity, Coach Logan had some adversity that we didn't necessarily choose, but the growth that came on the other side of that, that's a scar of the story I'm happy to share. And so many people have similar scars. And if you actually ask them, they'll tell you the story. And guess what? You've empowered them to share their story with someone else. But if you're walking around and you're never able to actually open up and share something about being vulnerable, well, you're missing your opportunity to actually share. So the reason I have this tattoo isn't just for my leukemia, it's a reminder that 80% of the leukemics die. So I'm lucky to be here, but this is an opportunity for me to normalize a conversation. And so to normalize the conversation of cancer allows people to feel empowered, and it removes the power of that word. So from now on, when you hear someone is struggling with cancer, don't worry about saying how you feel. They feel like shit. Okay? The better question is, how can I support you? The better question is not saying anything at all and just showing up. And showing up, whether it's your social media, whether it's physically being there. My best friend had just started a new job as a first-time soccer coach and says, I gotta go. And boom, was there. So to have those type of people in your life, and then being able to express it, so now you should give someone else that same opportunity. And everyone's scars are different. I'm not here to say, oh, my story is harder than or equal to or different than. It's my story. You have your story. You have your story. You have your story. But by empowering other people to share their stories, well, that's more of what I would think social media is actually for, to be able to connect people that are struggling and empower them to speak on their platform. Another interesting thing about pain is people teach you that pain is something you push through, right? We teach it all the time, conditioning, push through it, push through it, push through it, get past it. It's just on those sides you can keep going. While you can keep going, it is so much easier to accept. So sometimes pain is so insurmountable and overwhelming that you no longer can have a space to say push through it. And while muscles grow through force, the mind grows through stillness. So for me to be able to create a space and have the opportunity to go through a struggle to create some pain so that I had to determine what does a space look like for me so that I can accept pain, endure some discomfort, sit in that space instead of choosing distraction. When you choose distraction, it's like saying, I'm going to start this workout, I'm going to start this program, I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to do this job. 6 months later, 3 weeks later, distraction. I'm going to choose distraction. Instead of getting on my phone, I'm going to listen to this podcast. Instead of doing my workout, I'm going to jump on my phone, I'm going to make that call. You're choosing distraction. And anytime you choose distraction, you're telling your mind, this is the pathway I want to go. Instead of enduring whatever that discomfort is, especially sitting quietly, it's easier to choose a momentary relief. So when you choose to endure some things, when you choose to build some resiliency of staying in the moment, the more you do that, the more perspective you gain and you start to see things differently. Now mine kind of smacked me in the face and knocked me on the floor because I'm hard-headed, so that I probably needed that. But being able to choose discomfort and sit through that now has taken me from a struggle and a survival to striving. And so now, when I think about emotional intelligence is not something you go learn. I understand that it's a topic that a lot of people feel they should understand, this thing that people speak of. It's just something you live. It's not something you learn. And what I mean by that is, we can talk about in this space, empathetic resonance. So when people talk about you have a vibe, or I feel you, we're talking about this deep-seated actual neuroanatomy that I feel what you're feeling. I may have not been through that exactly, but I recognize what you're going through. And as soon as you can start sitting and waiting, you'll start feeling other people. But if you're not willing to sit and learn in yourself and explore your own head, then you'll never get in that space. Sure, we can talk about the best rep schemes, we can talk about the best exercises, we can talk about all those things. But if you're so involved in the experiment of what a workout should be, and not about what the environment of what people are going through is, you miss it. Now I work with people closer to my age, and they're also some of the best footballers in the world. I would say more of what my job is walking in a room and reading it. Here's the plan, here's what we have, here's what the science says, but how do I read the room? If I walk in that room and I'm messed up with stuff I have going on, I'm choosing distractions instead of long-term, I'm not sitting with my own discomfort, I'm not able to actually rest and sit in that silence, then I miss it all. And maybe I'm pissed off because I'm getting a vibe that you're pissed off, so I'm actually just projecting whatever your insecurity is. So when you start listening to people, and let's say it's someone you really struggle with, and you walk in that room, listen to what they're saying as if they're projecting their own insecurity of what they need to hear. So what I mean is, two people walk in, it's a heated conversation, you get into a room, neither of you is hearing each other, you're choosing the distraction of the emotion in that moment, of the emotion in that moment, instead of being able to hear each other. As soon as you can recognize and give someone else a space to say what they need to say, remove the emotion from it, and understand the logic, process it, and move on, and then you can de-identify the emotion, now you can actually logically move forward. So I say all that to say, there's no limit in your own exploration of actually identifying your true self. There may be a limit of how much stronger you can get cleanly. There may be a limit of how long you want to coach in an environment, but there's no limit on being able to sit in your own head and explore there. And the more time you spend here, the more time you can have your heart out there. And when you start to coach from that perspective, then all of a sudden things just happen. And they don't just happen, you're spending time right here making it ready. So what I have for you is a quote that I love. Connection to transformational change is an everyday process that you can only truly reflect back upon to realize the growth formed through daily consistency. Daily consistency doesn't mean getting it right every day. I love the saying from meditation practices, don't worry, we're not going to meditate. It says, well, what do? I got distracted, I messed up, I didn't begin again. I got to my goal, I'm a strength coach, blah, 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 now begin again. So if you can always go back to the perspective of there is no end point, and at any point you can choose to begin again, well, now you can start living your life in a different way. Instead of chasing your goals chase your life. The last thing I want to leave you with is when you force growth, force allows proprioceptive feedback. Force allows joint range of motion change. It allows muscular change. Force does not allow your mind to change. You can't say, I'm going to sit here and meditate. I'm going to sit here and think about the things I don't want to think about. It's not how it works. You have to create a space for yourself, and maybe it's in the squat rack while you're working out. Maybe it's a group of people that are going through things you're going through. But when you find that connection in that space, you'll want to spend more time there. And when you spend more time there, all these other things get really easy. Your priorities shift to say, does this fit into that thing I'm chasing that is myself? And is that best version of myself? Or am I stuck over here? So I just want to leave you with mind the stillness, explore yourself, and physically culture can be things like donating your blood, signing up for the bone marrow registry. That's truly physically cultured. So I'd like to end in the way we began. Stand up. Check your range of motion, because it's back to shit from you sitting. This time, instead of just going convergence and divergence for your eyes, you're going to go out in front. You can watch me first, because your shoulder will get tired, because we don't do stabilization work. It's fine. We're just going to trace. I'm going to do 3 reps at every angle. And I may need to hold my head so that I don't move it. 3 reps, every angle, all the way around. Make sure you test something first. Range of motion, strength, internal rotation, external rotation, whatever you need. Remember to breathe. It's better to go slower. Good, and reassess when you're done. Break the norm by being still. Thank you.